I did the Wild Bill Hickok television show for 7 years, yeah, along with Andy Devine. Also, before the television show, I made 15 feature pictures.
Hollywood once crafted the image of a masculine cowboy named Guy Madison, a man who made millions of women swoon. Yet, ironically, his heart quietly leaned toward other men. And now, with the posthumous release of his memoir, the veil of secrecy has finally been lifted. What were once mere whispers have now become undeniable truths. For the first time, the same-sex relationships of one of Hollywood's top leading men, Guy Madison, are being revealed in a direct and unflinching manner. The names mentioned within will no doubt leave you stunned. In 1922, in the state of California, at a time when America was slowly recovering from the First World War, a baby boy named Robert Ozell Mosley entered the world with his first cries. No one could have imagined that, just a few decades later, this very boy would rise to become a cowboy icon admired by millions of Americans, none other than Guy Madison. After serving in the United States Navy during World War II, Mosley had absolutely no intention of pursuing an acting career. But then, one fateful day, while working as a telephone technician at a Navy office in Burbank, he caught the attention of a director from Warner Brothers. With a face as chiseled as a marble statue of David, striking features, cold, piercing eyes, and a tall, commanding presence, Madison instantly captivated filmmakers. And soon after, the television series The Adventures of Wild Bill Hickok, 1951 to 1958, launched him into stardom. In the role of a righteous gunslinger in the wild frontier, Madison won the hearts of millions of American viewers, people who, week after week, sat glued to their TV screens, following the thrilling adventures of Wild Bill. However, behind that glamorous spotlight was a backstage world filled with rigid expectations and artificially constructed ideals of masculinity. Guy Madison led a double life at the heart of Hollywood, a place where he was a hero on screen, yet in reality, a lonely man constantly living in fear of being exposed as gay. From the 1940s through the 1960s, Hollywood exercised near total control over actors' lives, from their public image to their private affairs. Contracts during that era included morality clauses that strictly forbade any behavior deemed morally inappropriate. Any sign of difference, especially regarding sexual orientation, could instantly shatter an actor's career overnight. Within such a tightly bound environment, Guy Madison had no choice but to conceal his true identity. He became the quintessential American cowboy, a righteous, handsome, gentle, and respectable man toward women, flawless in every way. Film magazines praised him as the ideal male figure. But away from the spotlight, he was someone entirely different, quiet, isolated, and torn by inner conflict. His personal relationships were never made public. Madison loved in silence. Each affair left him with deeply etched memories. These were discreet same-sex romances, hidden loves buried beneath Hollywood's dazzling facade. 1. Rock Hudson, Hollywood's handsome leading man. Rock Hudson was once among the brightest stars on the silver screen during the 1950s and 1960s. He was seen as the embodiment of perfect masculinity in romantic dramas and war films of that era. For many years, the media continually speculated about his sexual orientation. But all rumors lacked concrete evidence until Hudson passed away from AIDS in 1985. This event sent shockwaves around the world and ignited serious conversations about AIDS and the LGBTQ community. Guy Madison first met rock at a private gathering among artists in Beverly Hills. At the time, Hudson was at the peak of his career, and Universal Studios had crafted his image as the ultimate symbol of the American man. Towering over 6'3", with broad shoulders, gray eyes, a deep, warm voice, and a smile that could melt the hearts of any housewife. He was the quintessential romantic lead in a string of love stories, appearing alongside some of the biggest names in the industry, such as Doris Day, Elizabeth Taylor, and Gina Lollobrigida. Madison described their relationship as close, but with boundaries, existing only in private spaces, never out in the open. The two began seeing each other in secret, carefully avoiding paparazzi lenses and the cruel whispers of tabloids. They never dated openly in Hollywood, instead retreating to places like Big Bear, where towering pine trees seemed to swallow every sound, or Laurel Canyon, a quiet artist enclave where Hudson owned a secluded little cabin. No phone calls, no fixed plans, no real names, just a space where every taboo could be set free. According to Madison, Hudson loved to cook, not in a flashy or gourmet way, but with simple, comforting dishes. Each time they stayed in Laurel, Guy would often wake at dawn to the smell of fried eggs and slightly burnt toast, mingling with the soft sounds of classic jazz drifting from a small radio, seeping into his dreams. They would eat breakfast together like any ordinary couple, something that felt almost impossible to do in Los Angeles. Hudson once confided that every time he kissed a female co-star on screen, he felt like he was betraying himself. Yet that was the only way to survive in an industry where being gay was considered a sin. They call me a masculine icon, the dream of American women. But no one has ever asked, who am I really? There was a time Hudson hinted at the idea of the two of them moving to Europe, where he had many friends in the French and Italian film scenes, a place he said felt more breathable. But Madison declined. He had television contracts to fulfill, children to care for, responsibilities to uphold. And so time passed, as it always does with love stories that were never allowed to fully blossom. When Rock Hudson became the first major public figure to reveal he had AIDS in 1985, the revelation shook American pop culture to its core. Madison never spoke up. No public condolences, no media statements. However, in his private journal, he wrote, "Rock Hudson was the first man who made me realize that some loves don't need to last forever, only be deep enough to never fade from memory." Hudson died in solitude, shunned by part of Hollywood, while the rest mourned him in silence. Madison did not attend the funeral, but, according to a mutual friend, the following morning, he quietly visited the cemetery, carrying a single white rose and a folded piece of paper that simply read, "For the stolen weekends, where you let me live as my true self." In the memoir published after his death, Madison preserved one name that remained forever etched in his heart. 2. Rammon Novaro, A Quiet Love. Amid the shadows of Hollywood, In the late 1940s, when Guy Madison was at the peak of his career, widely known as the heroic figure of the Wild West on the small screen, he met Rammon Novaro, once a dazzling icon of the silent film era. Novaro had earned the world's admiration through his legendary role in Ben-Hur, 1925. When the two met, Novaro had long since passed his golden age and was living quietly and privately. Yet, there was still a captivating depth about him, something that Madison could not take his eyes off. They first encountered each other at a small party in West Hollywood, a place where many artists came to momentarily escape their real-life roles. There was no sudden spark of love, nor any dramatic declarations. But after only a few meetings, Madison and Novaro bonded through a genuine and quiet affection. Only there, Madison once confided, did we find the peace that life outside would never allow. From then on, they began meeting discreetly. They often chose Palm Springs, a quiet desert town where small cottages nestled beneath palm shadows and sunlight, as their rendezvous point. Sometimes it was in West Hollywood, in apartments that close friends were willing to share. All meetings were punctual, held in absolute silence, with no one knowing, and no one allowed to know. They shared the simplest things, enjoying classical music together, reading books, chatting over tranquil breakfasts. There was no fiery passion or dramatic tragedy, only the empathy of two souls who had endured much pain, now finding each other as a final refuge to rest. No photographs of them together remain. Not a single letter has survived. Their relationship was never documented on paper, but it always lived on in Madison's memory. To him, it was not a secret affair, but the first time he ever loved safely, truly living as himself, even if only for a fleeting moment. Novaro never clung to Madison, nor did he make any promises. He understood that things so beautiful and fragile could never survive in a Hollywood full of prejudice. And Madison never saw him again. In 1968, when the press reported that Rammon Novaro had been murdered inside his old home, Madison, by then retired from the spotlight, kept silent for a whole week. Only later, in a discreet interview, he said just one sentence. No one really understood who Rammon was, but I did. If Rammon Novaro was Guy Madison's first tender same-sex love amid a harsh and barrier-filled Hollywood, then the next name would cause that cowboy to wrestle with an unbearable pain. 3. Tyrone Power, the duty-paid man of the film capital. Tyrone Power was once one of the brightest stars on Hollywood's silver screen, from the 1930s through the 1950s, leaving a deep mark with iconic roles such as The Mark of Zorro, 1940, and Blood and Sand, 1941. On screen, he appeared as a symbol of romantic charm, blended with captivating strength, a persona that enamored millions of audiences. Throughout his life, he experienced 2 marriages. Yet, behind the perfect image meticulously crafted by the film industry, lay a secret Hollywood always tried to deny. Tyrone Power was bisexual. Throughout his life, he lived in constant anxiety. His fame, career, and public persona tightly bound by multi-million-dollar contracts and the strict moral standards imposed by movie studios. Guy Madison met Tyrone Power in the early 1950s, when both were at the peak of their acting careers. At first, they were merely two film stars who frequently appeared at Hollywood's glamorous parties, places where behind strong drinks and skillful social conversations lay carefully staged smiles. However, amid accidental glances exchanged in the crowd, something genuine quietly sparked. It was not a reckless passion, but a profound resonance between two souls, weary from having to hide their true selves. Both understood clearly the ruthless rules in Hollywood. Even a wandering glance or an overly intimate gesture could spark vicious rumors. No one was like Tyrone, Madison once wrote. They began secretly meeting in rented bungalows in Palm Springs, places where few paid attention. Sometimes they would quietly listen to jazz music, have dinner in silence, or lie next to each other without saying a word, as if the silence itself was the healing balm for their souls. The time they spent together was scarce. Both were bound by hectic shooting schedules, contractual terms, and the subtle surveillance from the studios. But each rare moment together was always filled with a feeling that needed no words to express. I once woke up at 3 a.m. to find Tyrone still gazing at me, Madison recalled. He only said one sentence: "If only we had been born in a different era." After saying that, he turned away without waiting for me to reply. A few years later, Tyrone married. Madison also moved on with other relationships. However, in some personal letters discovered later, it was revealed that Madison still kept a candid photo of Tyrone smiling. Not the polished smile of a movie star, but the pure smile of a man who had been allowed to live true to himself, even if only for a brief moment. And the next name might just surprise you. 4. Anthony Perkins. A fragile love amidst Hollywood's invisible pressures. He came unexpectedly like a passing breeze and left just as gently, leaving in me a void that nothing could ever fill. That was all Guy Madison ever wrote about Anthony Perkins. When they first met, Perkins had only just begun to touch the glow of fame. A slender figure, a captivating face, with a beauty that transcended conventional gender norms. In his eyes, there was always a certain discordance with the body he inhabited. Meanwhile, Madison was already a renowned television star, the perfect embodiment of the all-American male archetype, upright, tough, and strong. At that time, Perkins was just barely in his 20s, having impressed with his role in Friendly Persuasion, 1956, and enjoying strong backing from Universal Studios. Only a few years later, his portrayal of Norman Bates in Psycho, 1960, would catapult him into a cinematic phenomenon. Back then, he was considered the ideal good boy model that Hollywood sought. Yet behind that dazzling exterior was a soul full of doubt, a gay man living in an environment that forced him to wear the mask of the perfect man in public. Among Perkins' same-sex relationships were names like Tab Hunter, Stephen Sondheim, and Rudolf Nureyev. All lived out in the shadows. He grew up under his mother's overprotective care and a cold relationship with his father, factors that contributed to his feelings of shame, confusion about his sexuality, and fear of long-term commitment. They first met at a discreet studio audition where both were asked to read a scene together. Perkins whispered his lines, eyes avoiding contact, But in that brief moment, Madison realized the young man was hiding something too, a mask just like the one he himself wore. Tony was always in a state of running away, Madison recalled. Even when sitting quietly, he kept turning his head over his shoulder, as if hearing the footsteps of fate drawing near. They arranged to meet in secret at a rented apartment, tucked away, deep in the Silver Lake area. The room had small windows, always covered with curtains. There, every touch, even the slightest, carried caution, as if tied to unpredictable consequences. Perkins lived with a constant obsession. Fear that affectionate looks toward Guy might be discovered. Fear of being followed by reporters. Fear of seeing his name scrawled on a public restroom wall, alongside the hateful slur faggot, just like many others who had been defamed and destroyed. Tony always carried a small suitcase, ready to disappear at any moment if everything collapsed. Madison, more experienced, became a rare safe haven for the young actor who was desperately trying to build the ideal man image sculpted by the studio. By day, Perkins appeared beside female stars on the red carpet. By night, he quietly rested his head on the shoulder of the man who was not allowed to be part of his public life. Their love was brief. 3 months, 6 meetings, more fears than kisses. Yet every embrace was genuine. We never talked about the future, only about the present, moment by moment. Maybe deep down, someone like him didn't even have a future to dream of. Madison bore no resentment. He understood. At that time, Perkins couldn't fully love anyone else because he hadn't yet learned to love himself. How could a person living in fear give love wholly? And a man constrained by Hollywood's harsh moral codes was even less able to do so. Later, Anthony Perkins married photographer and actress Barry Berenson in 1973, striving to project a proper image to the public, and had 2 sons. But even many years afterward, those close to him confirmed he continued to love men. His life ended in quiet tragedy. He died of AIDS in 1992, keeping his diagnosis secret until the very last moment for fear of media harassment. Guy Madison never publicly mentioned Perkins' name in any interview. But in a memoir manuscript left after his death, there was a single line written under Anthony's name. I never once held his hand in public, but one night, under the dim light of a desk lamp, he leaned his head on my shoulder and whispered, "Thank you for never asking anything from me." I have never forgotten that. In mid-20th century Hollywood, the concept of public dating between men who loved each other was virtually non-existent. Whether an A-list star or just a backstage crew member, anyone belonging to the LGBTQ+ community had to live within a dual system: a carefully constructed public image and a true life hidden behind the scenes. For Guy Madison, every personal relationship he experienced fell into a limited, taboo, gray area. My real life does not exist on the screen, he once wrote. It lies in the moments when I have to wear the face of a completely different person every day. That concealment and acting was not merely a survival strategy in a harsh environment, but also left lasting psychological wounds, wounds that not everyone could name or express in words. Guy Madison, like his lovers, lived many years in a state of inner conflict, yearning to be loved, yet constantly afraid of being punished for that love. Although caught in a multi-layered reality with relationships that could not be openly expressed, Guy Madison still entered into marriage twice and became the father of 4 children. Each marriage was a separate chapter in his life, reflecting not only the social circumstances of the time, but also his efforts to integrate and protect his public image, a typical example of a celebrity in the Hollywood film industry. Marriage to Gail Russell, 1949-1954. In 1949, Guy Madison married actress Gail Russell, at a time when both were at the peak of their careers. Russell was famous for her emotionally rich roles in films such as The Uninvited, 1944, and Angel and the Bad Man, 1947, and was beloved by audiences for her fragile appearance and eyes full of sorrow. However, cracks soon appeared in their married life. As a person with a strong introverted nature, Russell was diagnosed with severe social anxiety disorder. Facing pressure from Hollywood and the cameras, she gradually fell into alcoholism, a phenomenon not uncommon at that time for actresses who were both admired and exploited. According to those close to them, Madison initially tried his best to support his wife, but over time, he grew increasingly exhausted. The distance between them widened, especially as he was often away due to a hectic filming schedule for the series The Adventures of Wild Bill Hickok. They separated in 1953 and officially divorced in October 1954. Although their marriage was neither scandalous nor notorious, it left a deep emotional resonance. It is believed that Madison always held sincere sympathy for Russell's mental struggles until the end of her life. Marriage to Sheila Connelly, 1954 to 1963. Just weeks after finalizing his divorce from Russell, Madison entered into his second marriage with actress Sheila Connelly, a familiar face in westerns and dramas at the time. Their wedding took place in Ciudad Juarez, Mexico, a popular location chosen by many Hollywood stars for quick weddings or divorces to avoid attention from the American press. Compared to his previous marriage, Madison's relationship with Connelly was considered more close-knit and stable. They had 3 daughters, Bridget, Erin, and Dolly. Coming from a large family in California, Madison was known as a devoted father, despite frequently traveling between Europe and the United States for filming. He always made efforts to arrange time to be with his children. However, the intense workload and stressful lifestyle of the entertainment industry gradually strained their relationship. In 1963, his second marriage ended in divorce, though both parties maintained a friendly relationship. Madison continued to stay in contact and played an important role in raising his 3 daughters, especially when his career began to slow down, giving him more time to step back behind the scenes. Unexpected relationship with Gia Scala. After 2 unsuccessful marriages, Madison entered into an unofficial but profound relationship with actress Gia Scala, who was known for her role as Anna in the film The Guns of Navarone, 1961. Scala was an intelligent woman of both Italian and Irish descent, and she carried many inner wounds herself. She struggled with depression and alcoholism, similar to what Gail Russell had faced earlier. Though their relationship never led to marriage, friends described their bond as emotionally intense and deeply connected. A notable detail is that before her mysterious death in 1972, Gia Scala designated Guy Madison as the beneficiary of her actor's pension, an act that showed special trust and attachment between them. In addition to his 3 daughters with Connelly, Guy Madison had a son named Robert Madison, born in Italy from a later relationship in his life. Robert grew up in Rome, where Madison lived and worked primarily during the 1960s and 1970s, a period when he appeared in many spaghetti westerns and European-produced war films. Later on, Robert followed in his father's footsteps, working mainly in the film and television industry in Italy. Despite generational and geographical distances, multiple sources confirmed a close relationship between father and son. Guy Madison not only passed on acting skills, but also instilled a professional work ethic and resilience and to endure a harsh entertainment environment. Despite living with internal conflicts and having to conceal his personal identity for much of his career, Guy Madison still strove to build the image of a respectable family man in the public eye, a meaningful achievement for a star of the classic Hollywood generation. After nearly 30 years devoted to film and television, by the late 1970s, Guy Madison gradually withdrew from the spotlight. When the Western genre declined and a new generation of leading men emerged, he chose to leave quietly without making an official retirement announcement. Guy Madison, the quiet years closing a legend. For most of the remainder of his life, Guy Madison lived in Morongo Valley, a peaceful highland area located in Southern California, completely separated from the bustling rhythm of Hollywood. In this tranquil place, he built a farmhouse-style home amidst wild nature, spending his days tending to the garden, raising horses, and welcoming close friends. Although he never officially declared it, this lifestyle was clearly a deliberate form of seclusion. However, the final years of his life were overshadowed by emphysema, a chronic lung disease commonly caused by prolonged smoking. The illness severely weakened his respiratory function, reducing his mobility and forcing him to rely on long-term medical care. On February 6, 1996, Guy Madison passed away at a hospice facility in Palm Springs, a place dedicated to caring for terminally ill patients in a safe and respectful environment. He was 74 years old. His funeral was held solemnly, yet simply, attended by family members, close friends, and some former colleagues from the film industry. His remains were laid to rest at Forest Lawn Cemetery in Cathedral City, California, the final resting place of many legendary figures in the American film industry. Legacy and posthumous memoirs. Truths spoken only when fear no longer exists. For many years, Guy Madison chose to remain silent about his private life, not because of a lack of courage, but because the harsh machinery of classic Hollywood left him no alternative. At that time, acting contracts often included morality clauses, which forced actors to maintain an image aligned with traditional moral standards. Even a mere rumor about a supposedly deviant sexual orientation could cause them to lose their careers, contracts, and reputations forever. Therefore, Guy Madison's decision to leave behind a memoir revealing his past same-sex relationships after his death was not only a bold act, but also deeply symbolic. He wrote not to create scandal, but to live truthfully with himself one last time, when there was nothing left to hide and no one left to judge him for it. His relationships with Rammon Novaro, Tyrone Power, Anthony Perkins, and Rock Hudson, though brief, undisclosed during their lifetimes, and limited by circumstance, are enough to partially reconstruct the buried truth of 20th century Hollywood. A place where men who loved men had to live behind a curtain, continuing to play the role of normality, both on screen and off. Madison's posthumous memoir helped spark a more open dialogue about the LGBTQ+ community within the classic entertainment industry, where for decades, homosexuality was erased from official historical records. Today, Guy Madison is still remembered by the public as a classic icon of American Western films, with his role as Wild Bill Hickok becoming an inseparable part of popular culture through hundreds of television and radio episodes. Yet alongside this image, he is increasingly recognized as one of the few stars who dared to face the truth of his own life, even if only after he had passed away. His life stands as a testament to the inner struggle of wanting to live authentically in an era that did not allow it. And his memoir serves as a reminder that love, even when rejected by its time, can still be acknowledged by history. Please like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the most fascinating stories about the lives of famous stars.